receipt of public petitions a little bit later in the agenda. It's item number 5. So I'll ask that anybody who would like to speak this evening, when that time comes, that you fill out a speaker slip that you can get.
Here. Ms. Comont.
Here.
And Mr. Hyra.
Here.
Chair, we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have our agenda. It's, as far as I know, it's just as it's listed here. And are there any questions or comments from commission members regarding the agenda? Seeing none, I'll move that we adopt the agenda. Would someone like to second that?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions say no. Okay, then we have an agenda. So that brings us to our speaker series. And it's been a long time since we've had a speaker, so I'm very much looking forward to this. We have Kristen Jolicoeur from Arlington County to join us this evening, and we really appreciate you coming over and joining us, especially on an issue that's very much of interest to us, and we share probably a lot of the same issues and problems that Arlington has on this. So we very much look forward to your comments. And with that, Mr. Stoddard, if you would like to make an introduction.
Sure. I'll make a brief introduction. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the Commission. Just to briefly stump for the Speaker Series program, this is something that was a collaboration between the Planning Commission and staff, and obviously the guest speakers that started several years ago. But the motivation behind it was to make sure that the latest innovations in city planning were making their way into Falls Church and the Falls Church discussion. And so several years ago, staff began reaching out, as well as members of the Commission began reaching out to experts in the field, whether it was housing or environmental sustainability or transportation or landscape design, and inviting those speakers to the Commission to provide a presentation and engage in a Q&A with the commissioners. You all are a great forum for that because you all advise the council and the community and make decisions on so many of these different topics. And we also have the opportunity to record these presentations, live stream them so that everyone in the community can benefit from them, and of course post them on our website as well, where we do keep an archive of all of our Speaker Series events. So with that, I want to introduce our speaker tonight, who is Kristen Jolicoeur, and she is a senior watershed planner with Arlington County's Department of Environmental Services, or DES, as some people see it. She was the project manager for Arlington County's first Green Street project and now manages the county's Water Quality Capital Program, including the county's 12-year-old Green Street program. She has an undergraduate degree in geology from SUNY Geneseo, not a New Yorker over here. An MS in Marine Sciences from UNC Chapel Hill, professional certification in landscape design from GWU, and 20 years of experience in watershed protection, sustainable landscaping, project management, and environmental outreach. Kristen, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. It's definitely a compliment to be invited to come before the Planning Commission, and really hope that the information I'm sharing tonight can be useful to you. So Mr. Stoddard asked me to address a few things. One of the things I thought I'd start with is, what exactly do I mean when I'm talking about a Green Street, and why has Arlington invested in them?
So sorry to interrupt. Is the little green light on the microphone there? It is.
Can you,
okay.
is that better?
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you.
I'm too tall.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, thank you. So when we're talking about Green Streets, what we're talking about is a stormwater facility located in the public right-of-way that collects and stores polluted runoff to reduce the volume of that runoff and to remove the pollutants from it before they enter our local streams, the Potomac River or the Chesapeake Bay. And this is an example of one of the green streets we have installed in Arlington. This was installed in 2020, and this is what a green street looks like in action when it's accepting runoff from the public right-of-way and treating that stormwater. So just thought I'd go over some of the components of a green street bioretention facility, also known as a rain garden. Most of you have probably heard of these, but maybe not everyone has. So at the surface, again, is that storage area, which has about 6 to 12 inches of ponding that accepts the polluted runoff from the right-of-way. That area is planted. In Arlington, we use 100% native plants, and it's mulched. This is a landscape facility, so it appears at the surface when there isn't any rainwater stored in it as a garden, basically a depressed garden. And then below the surface are layers of soil and gravel that help filter pollutants from that polluted runoff. The facilities also allow for infiltration into the surrounding soil, but in Arlington, we often have soil that doesn't accept very much infiltration, so we install an underdrain in all of our facilities. That underdrain connects water that filters through the rain garden or the retention facility and conveys that water into the storm drain system. We also install an overflow so that when there's a large storm event and the facility can't accept all of the water that's coming to it, there's a place for that water to go safely. So this is one of our rain gardens. This is the first rain garden we installed in Arlington in 2011, and you can see it during a rain event doing its thing. On the right side, during the rain event, you can see where the water is flowing into the rain garden. Here, there are curb cuts in the street where the water is flowing into it and ponding, and then this is the overflow. And this is what it looked like about a year after it was installed with the plants in it on the right. So we do have a planning context for our Green Street initiative. Primarily, this initiative has been committed to by Arlington County through the approval of the county board and our comprehensive plan elements, including the Stormwater Master Plan. The Stormwater Master Plan was approved in 2014, and one of the linchpins of that master plan was a commitment to treat runoff that had to add facilities where runoff was not being treated or to improve facilities that were not functioning fully. So we conducted a countywide retrofit assessment, and that study resulted in a ranked inventory of 1,200 retrofit projects. 70% of which were green streets. In addition, our master transportation plan, which was approved in 2017, and our forestry and natural resources plan, which should come before the county board in the fall, both emphasize the need to assess the public right-of-way and to evaluate the ability to add facilities that treat impervious cover, reduce impervious cover, and filter and treat stormwater runoff. In addition, the Forestry and Natural Resources Plan provides for adding additional green spaces that can be naturalized and can provide habitat and ecosystem services. Those ecosystem services in that green space supports our commitment to our Biophilic Cities initiative, which we joined in 2020. So going back to the countywide retrofit assessment, 70% of the facilities we identified through that were in the public right-of-way. This illustration describes why that is the case. This points out where Arlington's impervious cover is located. About 50% of it is privately owned, and about 50% of it is publicly owned. And the large majority of the publicly owned impervious cover in Arlington is in its roadways and affiliated infrastructure, sidewalks, medians, et cetera. For this reason, green streets are one of the ways that we work to offset the existing impervious cover in the community. Green streets are also a way to mitigate for the impervious cover increase that we know is also occurring in our community. This trend line, which shows a 4% average increase per year, was developed based on data collected from 2009 to 2019. So a 4% increase in impervious cover for Arlington is the addition of essentially 1 pentagon per year. So it's a pretty substantive area. And what we discovered when we looked at that was that that area was about 3 times our regulated development activity. So only a third of the impervious cover that's added each year is actually subject to stormwater management requirements. Additionally, just like Falls Church has, Arlington has regulatory drivers. We are a Phase 1 MS4 community, municipal separate storm sewer system. And we have our Chesapeake Bay total maximum daily load, also known as the Chesapeake Bay pollution diet requirements, that incorporated into our MS4 permit requirements. This means that we're in our second permit cycle, which means that we have to achieve 40% of our requirements by fiscal year 2026. So we have about 3 more years to get to 40% of our required sediment, phosphorus, and nitrogen reductions. And you can see where 40% is in this, this estimated reduction by source information. You can see that green streets are not the largest component of how we plan to meet our regulatory requirements, but they are a very important component. In addition, what green streets offer that some other tools we have don't is they offer what we think of as triple bottom line co-benefits. In addition to treating stormwater, they also help us with climate change mitigation by reducing urban heat island effects and providing storage for carbon. Important for today, especially, is they also can provide air quality improvement. And they also provide human health benefits by adding natural spaces, biophilic services, add aesthetics and placemaking, and also add to our ecosystem services that are offered in the community. So now I'm going to take you on a tour of some of the green streets in Arlington. We have essentially, I guess I would say, 3 archetypes of where we place green streets in our community. One of the fundamental places we place them is in medians or islands within the roadway. This is an example of one of those facilities on Williamsburg Boulevard, which is an arterial street in Arlington. This is another example. This is on John Marshall Island. This is a residential street. And one of the issues that we have discovered with placing green streets in the median is that they tend to be more expensive than adding them in some of the other locations where we have placed them. And one of the reasons for that is that the road is crowned. So water goes away from the center of the road toward the edges, which means we have to add infrastructure to basically carry the water back to the center of the roadway. So in this example, there's a new catch basin over here, which you can't really see, and then over here, as one of my geology professors would say, just off the map, conveying the water back into the center of the roadway so that it can be treated. This is an example. This is the same facility in the wintertime, or in the fall, going into the wintertime, just to illustrate how it's important to focus on aesthetics, not just in the summer and the growing season, but also all year round for the benefit of the community. This is another example of a green street in a kind of an island. This is also in North Arlington in a residential setting. I like this picture because you can see exactly what's happening here. The water comes into this new catch basin. It comes out where this stone is, and then overflows this kind of lip that helps it spread out into the facility, and then overflows at the grate in the back that you see in the photo. This is the facility just after planting, and this is the facility a year later. The second location where we've been placing our green streets is at intersections. This is at a residential intersection, 11th and Evergreen, North Arlington. And this was placing facilities at intersections allows us to work with our Department of Transportation, and we have a program called the Arlington Neighborhood Program, both of which work on in our streetscapes to improve intersections for public safety, community enhancement, and we're able to partner with those programs in order to make our program more cost effective. This is another example of one of those corner facilities. And this is the, whoops, sorry, that was really fast. And this is what it looks like during a rain event. You can see the water entering the curb cut here, goes over a series of terraces, and then it overflows back into the storm drain system. The third setting for our green streets is as bump outs. And this is an example of one that was placed where we have a paper street. So it's a street on our mapping only, but will never be used for roadway. So we were able to use that area. Because there is some green space here that was being used by the community, we bumped this facility out into the roadway as well as used some of the right-of-way behind it. And here is another example of one of them in a mid-block setting. You can see that this is located in front of two residences. This is something that we were able to do because these residences and the property owners supported taking their parking. But this is a really big issue in Arlington, is removal of parking in front of homes, as I'm sure it would be here in Falls Church. So I thought I'd close out this section by just talking about one of my favorite projects, which was our Penrose project. I think this is really illustrative of what we've been able to do in partnering. This was with our Arlington Neighborhoods program. This is the before alignment of this intersection, which was dangerous, not just for traffic and vehicles, but also for pedestrians. And the realigned intersection has this new extended sidewalk, new green space, and new crosswalks, which made improved public safety, vehicular safety, pedestrian safety. But we were also able to add in a rain garden here and a second one here. You can see the water would enter them through these cuts in the sidewalk, which are pretty visible in this picture. One of the reasons we really valued this project is because this is in South Arlington in one of our traditionally African American neighborhoods, which is still has a high percentage of low-income families, high percentage of people of color, and is located right next to our Human Services building, which provides support to a lot of folks in those communities. And this is what it looks like on the ground, so you can see it in its setting. Okay. So Mr. Stoddard also asked me to address the costs of green streets and some of the challenges we've had. And so our investment in green streets started in 2011. At that time, we only had one staff person working on this. And Arlington has an in-house engineering bureau, so we provide a lot of our engineering and design services in-house. And we did not have any engineers who had any expertise in this. So we really struggled for the first few years to get these projects installed until we were able to hire a team of staff. We hired 2 additional project managers, one of which focuses almost solely on green streets. And then we also were able to train and hire some engineers with more stormwater experience, which has allowed our program to grow. As of today, we have 27 green streets installed in Arlington and another 13 in some phase of design at the moment. So the average cost for a facility is about $175,000. relative to many of the things that communities do, they're not that expensive, although they do add up. And I used only the most recent year's data for this number, since costs have increased drastically over the last few years. What that comes out to is about $290,000 per impervious acre treated. $12 per gallon sounds better, but probably more meaningful is the larger number. What that translates to in terms of our capital program is about an $8 million budget over 10 years, or about $600 to $1,000 annually, which is funded through, we have a sanitary tax in Arlington currently, but we're switching to a stormwater fee in the upcoming fiscal year. So these facilities have some kind of, they have physical constraints related to the location. You have to have enough space in the right-of-way to accept all the water that will be coming to that location. You have to have an area that's not very highly sloped. There can't be utilities in the public right-of-way, and in Arlington, that's kind of a challenge. There are lots of utilities in our roadway, as I'm sure there will be here. But often more telling are the community concerns. And those typically, the strongest concerns that we hear from residents are parking, removal of parking, decrease in property value or perceived decrease in property value, concerns about aesthetics and maintenance, and then safety. And then if the homeowner or property owner has drainage issues already, they worry about making those drainage issues more drastic. So how do we address these? Parking, I think, is the one that we may have been most successful at addressing, largely through avoidance, I will be honest. What we have come to do, as I said, is focus on intersections. This is an example of where we preferentially site facilities. This home has frontage here on this arterial street, and then on this residential street, we put the bioretention facility, the Green Street, what this means is that they still have one side of their property that is not, encumbered. They still have their parking in front of their house. They don't have to worry about their lead walk, not letting them go to their car the way they'd want to, or having their visitors come. They don't have to worry about not having a place to put their trash cans out, which we hear often. And in this case, the road was wide enough that we actually were able to preserve parking in front of the Green Street, which very rarely are we able to do. Property values is something that we have really struggled to address because I think this is more of a perceived issue than a real one based on the data. But the data is, hard to communicate to property owners. I mean, the studies that have been done have shown that green streets and rain gardens actually increase property values, along with, as do most investments in green infrastructure like trees, canopy trees. And the ecosystems that these facilities provide can also be quantified. We're talking environmental benefits, human health benefits, energy benefits, and all of those things can be quantified, which add up to an overall benefit to a property owner, although I think that is a lot harder for them to process. Oops. And so then the last thing I'm going to talk about now is the maintenance and aesthetics. We invest heavily in maintenance to address this concern. We spend about $6,500 a year on each of these facilities, and we maintain them about 10 months out of the year. So, and we have a very skilled a very skilled manager who's a staff person, and then we have a contract that she manages for the actual maintenance itself. We have invested, I think, in our staff, in both engineering and design professionals. We have a landscape architect on our team so that we have the interdisciplinary team needed to install and design these facilities in a way that they fit into the landscape. We also do a lot of work with individual homeowners on the planting plan for the facility right in front of their home, so they have an opportunity to add their feedback, have their sense of aesthetics reflected in the planting plan that is chosen for them. And then we also design these with one of the things that we have done, although theoretically you can have a foot deep facility, we have gone to a 6-inch facility almost wholly because nobody wants to look at a pit in front of their house. So we have made that choice, and that is a choice that we've made for aesthetics, for context, and I think also for our own, we don't think that there's a safety risk from a deeper facility, but the perception of safety is very important to us. And we have also tried to design our facilities where they are offset from the sidewalk so that no one feels like they're going to plunge off the sidewalk into, one of these bioretention facilities.
Yep.
That has never happened, to my knowledge. We did have one car, but I don't think it had anything to do with the bioretention. All right, so that is all for now, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Well, thank you very much for that nicely detailed presentation. That was very useful, and I'm glad we record these so that we can go back and look at them in the future as well as our residents as well. You anticipated the one question I was going to have on maintenance, so I have just one other question, and that is whether or not you've considered trying to work out arrangements to put one of these facilities on private property, maybe through some remuneration to the homeowner or business owner.
We have, not for green streets, we have several larger ponds in Arlington. Stormwater pond is another way to treat polluted runoff, and we don't have very many in Arlington, but we have several where they are on private property, and we have been working on some long-term easements, permanent easements.
Still to come, in
Yeah.
other words. Yep. Okay, well, thank you. Let me open it up to any questions or comments from the commissioners. Yeah, on this side. Ms. Coma?
Thank you. That was really interesting. It was a great presentation. Tons of good information. I'm sure it'll be useful to us. We do have a few of these facilities ourselves, the Cavalier Trail and the Meridian High School.
North Washington?
Yep, North Washington. So, but it's great to see these examples and learn from them. You mentioned that the impervious cover added each year is 3 times what you are permitting. So I was just curious if you have any ideas about where that extra sort of impervious is coming from, or any theories about that.
Yeah, we have determined that some of it is coming from small-scale projects, a lot of like walkways, patios, things that we don't require a permit for in Arlington, but do add hardscape. That seems to be where a lot of it is coming from.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I anticipated. All right, thank you so much.
Sure.
Corey?
Thank you. That was very helpful, and I've admired the green streets, particularly on Williamsburg, for quite some time. I think it's lovely.
Great.
2 questions for you. One, how did you get started on this? I mean, I note that you started, I think, in 2014, I think you said, through Stormwater Master Plan. I mean, what does it take to get started on a Stormwater Master Plan and the Green Street Plan more particularly? And 2, you shared the cost, I think $290,000 per impervious acre. How would you compare that to installing the equivalent amount of gray infrastructure in terms of cost?
Right. Okay. So we got started by there's a retrofit assessment protocol that the Center for Watershed Protection has published, and that was the basis for the study that we did. And we started by looking at one watershed in the county, and then we expanded it from there. What we have found over time is that we get the most cost-effective facilities when we partner with other capital programs. And so, not that we have abandoned that study, but we have moved to more of a, I'd say more of an opportunistic model where we, other departments actually come to us and say, we have a project, is there an opportunity here? So in terms of how it compares cost-wise to gray infrastructure, so I can't really reflect that for Arlington. They've done studies for combined sewer systems, like the District of Columbia has done that, and it ended up being more cost-effective to do the green infrastructure than the gray. But there were other corollary issues like maintenance. So I think DC, for instance, and they invested in green infrastructure with the idea that then they might be able to abandon some of their gray infrastructure storage plans, and ended up compromising, kind of meeting halfway because of some of those corollary issues.
Mr. Grassley.
I think you kind of answered my question. I was going to ask about, how you located, potential sites. Arlington, of course, is many times bigger than we are, and I wondered if you'd had like some kind of matrix or something where you tried to, identify qualities that would lend themselves to this. I mean, I think although you talked about partnering with other projects, so like I think on the Williamsburg project, was that related? There was like water main replacement going on and other things happening along that stretch.
Yeah.
Is it related to that? Is that what you mean when you talk about kind of piggybacking on or coordinating with other improvements? And did that help with the cost, maybe?
Yeah, it does help with the cost. We did not partner with another program for the Williamsburg project. That was one that was identified through the assessment. The assessment started, we laid out certain criteria we had based on how much runoff we wanted to treat, how many impervious acres we wanted to treat with the facility, like our thresholds, our minimum thresholds, and then they started with a desktop analysis, and then we did a field study following up on that. But we laid out certain criteria that were our minimums.
Did you use like GIS as part of that? To try
Yeah.
To,
Mhm. We started with a GIS analysis.
Okay.
Yep. But yes, as I mentioned, we haven't wholly, it's not like we've abandoned that study, but we are actually, we also take an opportunistic approach when we have it because of the cost benefits. It's cost benefits, it's also disruption to the community. There's one project going in at a time. We can also, have our project go in at the same time. So there's a lot of reasons for us to partner with other programs.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Just that actually gets my question. About how long does it take to install an average project? The time to completion, when you plan it out till you're done, how long does it take?
Yeah, our design time is probably longer than an average design time because of the number of checks, internal checks and balances we have. But I'd say it's probably about 6 to 9 months to design, and then maybe 2 to 3 months to build. Yeah, so, 9 months to a year for a project.
Okay. Mr. Stoddard.
I wonder if I might ask, so a lot of times we rely on grant funding, which sometimes can have a very specific purpose. And I was wondering a little bit about your funding streams and your funding structure, just because something like Green Streets, which delivers co-benefits, whether that's habitat restoration, or I noticed in the Penrose project, even the seeding, and really turning something that was sort of this diamond-shaped or diagonally trapezoidal-shaped intersection into what becomes sort of like a park space or a resting space for the community. So you've got pedestrian safety, you've got seeding, you've got wildlife, you've got stormwater, you've got water quality, you've got water quantity. So I wonder a little bit about sort of your funding stream and how you sort of tackle some of those conversations.
So we do, I mean, we emphasize all of those benefits when we're talking about the program. I think the primary driver that our internal leadership is responding to right now is our regulatory requirements, honestly. In terms of grant funding, we have had some grant funding, but most of our funding has been part of our CIP.
Thank you.
Sure.
Final call? Okay, we appear to be done. So again, Ms. Jolicoeur, thank you very much for making the trip over from Arlington. We greatly appreciate the knowledge that you've shared with us this evening.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is receipt of petitions. And this is basically just anyone who would like to address the Planning Commission. First of all, I wanted to welcome any of you who are here connected to the Eden Center. You're very welcome to our meeting here this evening. In terms of our speaking rules, we allow for up to 3 minutes. If anyone would like to speak, again, if they could fill out one of the speaker slips that's available in the lobby outside, if you could just fill that out very briefly and hand it to Mr. Trainer, and he will call speakers. And for those of you speaking, if you could do so at the podium and make sure that little green light is on, and we'd greatly appreciate it if you could speak directly into the microphone so that we can all hear you. And so with that, I think we can go ahead and proceed. Mr. Trainer? Yeah, I guess that's a good point. I don't know if you're able to determine if there are any speakers who want to address items not on the agenda. If so, perhaps they could come first and then,
Yeah, all the speaker slips I have are agenda items.
okay. Very good.
So our first,
Okay, I'm advised correctly that we should officially indicate that this is part of the public hearing, which is part of our formal process for the action that we'll be taking this evening on the small area plan. So I'll just designate that as such. Okay?
great. Our first speaker is Jen Tran, followed by Sandra Welsford.
Welcome. Is a little green light on the base of the...
Oh, how's that?
There you go. Now
Okay.
you're coming in. Fine, thank you.
Hi, I'm Jen Tran. I just wanted to start with a thank you. I know with so much community outreach, there's a lot of materials that you're reading through. Staff has spent a lot of time making those materials. So thank you all for the effort. I wanted to draw attention specifically to the anti-displacement programs and that the current plan lacks any suggestion on how to actually fund and implement those plans. We, as a community, really appreciate their inclusion. They're really important. But I would like to see a more concrete suggestion of how that could actually happen. These programs at their core are just ways the city can make sure that businesses can weather the economic changes that development will bring. And I personally think the city does need to do a better job of protecting its small businesses citywide, not just at Eden Center. I do know a handful of pretty iconic Falls Church businesses that do feel like the city has, in some cases, prioritized developers over hardworking family-owned businesses. So all in all, our push for anti-displacement in the East End, and specifically starting at Eden Center, I think are a really amazing opportunity for the city to experiment and try something new. Commit to real equitable development at a community scale. And if we see success, apply this citywide and preserve the real fabric and funk of the Falls Church that we love. I don't want to see these anti-displacement programs fade away because there isn't a will to fund them. So I'm asking that this plan include language designating maybe a percentage of the increased tax revenue that the city will see, or a portion of development budget to go directly towards these business preservation programs, you know, to stay true to the name, the Little City, and stay true to the spirit of what Falls Church stands for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sandra Welsford, followed by Evelyn Yuen.
Good evening, Planning Commission and City staff. My name is Evelyn Yoon, and I'm a frequent customer at Eden Center despite living on the other side of the Potomac River in Rockville, Maryland. And I would like to first thank you for all of your commitment to making anti-displacement of Vietnamese-owned businesses a primary goal of the SAP's overall vision and goals. However, I would like to urge you to demonstrate stronger commitment in preventing displacement by having a clearer and more definitive language in the economic development chapter of the SAP. So page 6 of the Chapter 4 suggests a legacy business conservation program to invest tax money for business improvements. And while it outlines how other jurisdictions define their eligibility, I hope to see more definitive criteria, especially for Eden Center businesses' participation, and as well as how the City of Falls Church envisioned the program. And also in the same page, it also mentions how Small Businesses Assistance Grant Program was carried out by the city in response to COVID-19. I really appreciate that, and I hope that stronger language regarding the city's next steps can be shown, since its ephemerality might not necessarily serve the long-term goal of anti-displacement. And ideally, I hope to see a legally binding funding agreement that allocates a percentage of tax revenue generated by Eden Center to fund anti-displacement programs to be included as a strategy in the economic development chapter. And speaking of promoting community benefits, I hope that the special exception criteria be amended to require the negotiation of a legally binding agreement between community stakeholders and any future developer. I really appreciate the strategy outlined in page 10 to leverage special exception criteria. The 3 listed criteria in the SAP do not include requirements for a negotiation between community stakeholders and future developers. And then lastly, I hope to see a promise for an increase of total free parking spaces for Eden Center businesses, since they attract a lot of customers from all over the Chesapeake region, like myself, who drive instead of using public transit to get it to Eden Center. And while the SAP recognizes the importance of parking, I hope promises for increasing free parking spaces can be included. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sandra Welsford? She's not here. Not here? Okay. We have Deandra Tucker, followed by Alan Frank.
Welcome.
Hello. Hi, council members. My name's Deandra Tucker. I'm a resident of Alexandria, but frequent customer of the Eden Center businesses. And I just wanted to just show my support of anti-displacement policies, because I don't think the current plan addresses it in any meaningful way. So I'm just hoping that you will actually take the community's concerns and feedback into consideration and make sure that we don't lose the actual unique character of Falls Church and Eden Center, because it's such a unique area. It's already been displaced once, and I would hate to see it happen again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Alan Frank.
Hi, good evening. Alan Frank. I'm General Counsel and a Senior Vice President for Eden Center for a long time. We've been around for 40 years as Eden Center, and it's been quite a ride that we hope will continue for generations, and that's our plan. And I've said that so many times that I know you don't need to hear that. It's an interesting place. We have tenants that have been there since the early 1980s, the same tenant. We have tenants whose children now run their businesses, the same business, or maybe they've changed it from a jewelry store to a restaurant, but they have the same place. We have tenants who are still there who have children that run other stores at Eden Center. it's a unique thing. I don't think you'll see that anywhere else in the city in a shopping center, that you have longevity like we have had. And we're very proud of that. The plan, let me talk about the plan in my time that's left. We have met yesterday with the Viet Place Collective, several members of the group. Had a nice meeting. I think it lasted almost 2 hours. We have things in common. We both want Eden Center to be there for generations to come. We have things that we want to do together, cultural events. We were talking about a big mural yesterday that we can get on that right away, artwork. We have annual events. We have charitable things that we need help on, and we already work with many community organizations, but we would welcome the opportunity to work with the Viet Place Collective. I don't know how many vaccine clinics we had at Eden Center over the last few years, but it's all sorts of things. So that's what we'd like to finish. I'd like to finish up, and there's other things in the plan. There's an incubator space. That's a cool idea. The idea of a cultural center. I would like to say that we have a new 10,000 square foot meeting space downstairs at Eden Center. That would make be a terrific use of that space in the future for community meetings, senior events, whatever, parties, etc. And last and really almost most important, staff has, and this commission and council has spent an incredible amount of time on this and thoughtful process, and we've had a lot of hearings, a lot of pop-ups, and I can say that I think the whole community has heard about this. So that's they all to be commended, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers?
Yep. Graham Eddy, followed by Quinn Nguyen.
Thank you. My name is Graham Eddy. I am Vice President and Associate General Counsel for Eden Center. I want to thank you for taking the time. This has been a lot of time we've been doing this, and Paul, and Jim and Paul and Zoe and Cameron and Emily, not to leave anybody out, have been great, and they spent a lot of time with us, and I really, really appreciate it. And I want to appreciate you taking the time and read the letter that we sent that kind of has a good overview of how we feel about the plan and what our plans are in the future. As Alan said, we've said it again, in some ways, it doesn't, we have no opinion because we don't plan to redevelop, right? The plan really comes into effect if there's some redevelopment, and our goal is that, generations to come, it'll be the same. I love my job. I love Eden Center. And to that end, I was fortunate to be at that meeting with Alan yesterday where we, Councilmember Letty Hardy set that up for us with the Viet Place Collective, and we found we have a lot in common. Matter of fact, almost identical goals. There are a few places where we differ on how we reach those goals, but that's normal. One of which was the naming of the area. We've worked for 40 years to have that Eden Center brand be known worldwide, and we're really proud of that. And we really appreciate the city putting the markers up, showing that. We regularly get tour buses from all around the world, literally international tourists, buses and buses every week coming to Eden Center. And there's only one Eden Center. So sometimes there's good ideas, like naming something Little Saigon would be a great idea, and I get why that was proposed. But there's a few other Little Saigons in America. There's only one Eden Center, right? And we love it, and we're proud of it. I feel like I said, I think I have the best job in the world. I get to work with the wonderful tenants and customers that we have, and I really hope that I get to work with the collective, and I hope that it continues after this, when the plan's over. When we do our thing and it gets put on a shelf somewhere, I hope that we can work together to, do the things that Alan was talking about, the mural and the meetings. I'd love to have more events at Eden Center, right? My understanding, it was an event to support the collective. I'd like to have that at Eden Center, right? That makes sense. So and that's part of my job. I literally am paid to keep tenants from being displaced. That's like my job title, basically. In the letter I talked about during COVID, we had over 100 tenants who couldn't pay rent for months at a time. And my job was to keep them going, right? And I'm very proud of the fact we did. We evicted nobody. There were a few tenants that couldn't make it for other reasons. But, today, now we are full and we have a waiting list, And so, we are a very significant business incubator. I'd like to say that the largest in Falls Church City and maybe Northern Virginia and beyond. I mean, that's what we do, and I love it, and I love our tenants. And there's no way that I would let anything get in the way of our tenants not being there, because it wouldn't be Eden Center without the small businesses. And I'm saying this, I've said this in the letter, but I just want to make sure that everyone knows that's how I feel. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Quinn Nguyen, followed by Amanda Luo.
Welcome.
Sorry, I'm short. Okay, can you hear me?
Sounds
All right.
good.
Hello once again, Planning Commissioners. My name is Quinn. I hope I'm becoming a familiar face to you as a representative of Viet Place Collective. I'm here to comment briefly about a major change that we noticed from the version of the plan released after all the community feedback was collected from the pop-ups at Eden. I'll call this older one, the May draft, to the most recent version of the plan attached to this meeting's agenda, and I'll call this most recent one the June draft. From the second community meeting from November 2022 to now, you've heard the name Little Saigon East as a suggested alternative name to the so-called East End that honors the specific history and culture of the Vietnamese community that chose Falls Church to root their livelihoods and have since made the area so vibrant, and East, the east part of Little Saigon, to acknowledge that it's in the east end of the little city. The name Little Saigon East is an organic community suggestion for which we saw much support during our community outreach as well as at the pop-ups at Eden Center. And we believe that Little Saigon East also acknowledges our community's history of displacement from Falls Church and Falls Church's commitment to equity and cultural preservation. Some of you at the city, especially Paul, really embraced the name, and the planners included it in the May draft, and we commend the planners for it. But then you heard from Eden Center's management, you heard from him again, who complained that Little Saigon East would quote-unquote dilute the Eden Center brand. To condense our thoughts about this so-called reason in a diplomatic way, we beg to differ and believe both names can coexist. It seems that you're trying to consider the opinions of the differing stakeholders here, but it isn't lost on me that many in the Vietnamese community want Little Saigon East because of the cultural significance it invokes. But one non-Vietnamese landlord said, no, we don't like how it competes with our brand, and then the planners removed all mentions of Little Saigon East as the name of the cultural district from the June draft. My main point is I can't help but reflect on the power dynamics at play here, and I wonder what other community recommendations the city will deprioritize or even brush off in the future because the landlord said it wasn't in their best interest. I know the specific name will be determined in a future process, so I understand making it to be determined for now. But my ask here is that the plan be edited to at least acknowledge that Little Saigon East is a popular cultural district name suggestion from the community, rather than pretending the name never even happened. What makes it valuable is that it will be on record. We thank you for taking to heart our suggestion of making anti-displacement a main goal of the plan, and I hope that you also take to heart my edit suggestion alongside my teammates' suggestions as well before the plan becomes officially recommended. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Amanda Luo.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Amanda with Viet Place Collective. And to begin, I want to thank the Falls Church Planning Commission and staff members for all of the work and outreach done over the past couple of months and meeting the community most affected by the SAP more where they are at, and taking their feedback and requests into consideration for the plan. The extra time and care is very meaningful, considering the long-term impact of the plan to Falls Church residents, business owners, and visitors to the area from all over. I want to bring to everyone's attention, though, that the most recent version of the SAP is greatly improved, and there are still some key components the community has provided feedback on that need to be front of mind for planning and budgeting. So first, the cultural celebration district is good, but acknowledging the area as Little Saigon East is better because it is a culturally significant name and more promotable in the future as well. Please consider this rebranding, as this is what the larger community wants and has voiced. Second, more tangible funding and legal backing of the anti-displacement measures and assistance. please use stronger language and dedicate a dollar or percentage amount to fund these measures and make them a reality in the budgeting process. Third, increased free parking. So we've seen malls in the area like Pentagon Row become more cumbersome to access even with public transportation options due to expensive parking. So please promote free parking for any possible future developments, regardless of the owning entity and type, whether it's garage or street metered. These would be high-value wins for the community impacted by the SAP. Everyone has recognized that Eden Center is a gem for Falls Church, and the protection of the vibrant small business community and the Vietnamese cultural identity of the area is what drives these requests. We want the improvements as already outlined by the updated SAP, but I want to seize this opportunity and set a model example by making stronger commitments to give the community what they deserve so that the area continues to thrive. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our last in-person speaker is Brandon Pori. And then we have one remote speaker on the line as well.
Hey everyone, my name is Brandon Dong. I'm a concerned community member coming from DC. So I'm coming as someone who has spent a lot of my childhood in Eden Center. I'm really coming to emphasize the importance of the anti-displacement efforts. Eden Center is a focal point for the Vietnamese community in the DC area, both inside and outside of Falls Church. For my parents who struggled to find home and belong in this country from, due to language barriers and cultural differences, Eden Center acted as kind of an oasis where they could go to remember a home that they had to leave. Asian neighborhoods, like many communities of color, are in danger all over the country. I worked as an ESL instructor in Chicago and saw hardworking Vietnamese immigrants lose their restaurants and livelihoods as rents went up, as development accelerated in a neighborhood that for years was neglected. Over the last 20 years, in that community, they lost a third of their Asian residents. In Philadelphia, their own Vietnamese commercial center, much like Eden Center, Hoa Binh Plaza, was lost when property prices went up, and a lot of predatory real estate agents began weaponizing health code violations, health code enforcements against immigrant store owners in order to shut down their storefronts and sell property. I'm giving you this context to say that our fight to preserve Eden Center exists in a larger context where we're all just kind of people fighting to keep a piece of home and a piece of, I guess, like memory that we hold very dear to us. And just to really kind of like re-emphasize the importance of anti-displacement measures, not just the ones that we're discussing today, but moving forward, I see this as kind of like a first step, a very important step that the city and that the community needs to take to ensure that the people that built Eden Center, the community members that make Falls Church the place where it is, continue to be able to live here and do business here. So that's the message I want to leave. Thank you so much for all of your work on this. Especially shout out to all the people, the Vietnamese people in the audience. But yeah, thank you.
And thank you.
We actually have one more in-person speaker, Calvin Trong.
Welcome.
Hi, my name is Calvin Trong. I am representing myself. I'm going to be honest, I didn't expect I was going to be speaking today, but I came to support the Vietnamese community, the Vietnamese culture, and the one thing that really hit home for me, as I've heard these lovely people speak, is the strong language on anti-displacement measures. That's one thing I would urge you to please take into strong consideration, and that's really all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have one remote speaker, Sean Williams. Sean, go ahead.
Hello, can everybody hear me? All right,
Yes.
hello and good evening. My name is Sean Williams, and I'm a member of Virginia Student Power Network, and I'm here to demand that you include anti-displacement strategies as the main goal in the East End Small Area Plan. as well as rename the East End to Little Saigon East and to have these actions made clear and concise in the plan. These measures will ensure that the Vietnamese community and businesses that continuously bring in revenue to the City of Falls Church will not be priced out and forced to relocate, and to ensure the survival of small businesses and the culture that makes up the Eden Center. Like many other Vietnamese people, I hold a special place in my heart for Eden Center. I grew up in the Northern Virginia area, often spending weekends with my Bam Wai and the rest of my family going to the Eden Center. Whether it was renting variety show VHSs and DVDs at Tons Video, having a bite to eat at Hai Dung, or grabbing our incense and other items for our Buddhist altars at Bat Nha. My family knows many of the people who come to eat, shop, and work at Eden personally, as we have been going for several decades. Just this past February, my mother and I celebrated Tet at Eden Center, which I haven't done in a few years as I was away at college. However, due to recent events regarding the East End Small Area Plan, which I may add was brought to our attention by folks from a Viet Place collective, so thank you, my mother and I have talked about what Eden Center means to us as Black Viet Kieu, or overseas Vietnamese people. Folks like my mother and my uncle, as Black Vietnamese people, felt isolated while in Vietnam and came here through a program reuniting children fathered by Americans in 1983. However, despite my mother living here for nearly 40 years, she still misses aspects of her culture and homeland that she can only find at Eden Center. I'll state some facts to put the importance into perspective. Eden Center is the largest Vietnamese commercial center on the East Coast and the largest Asian mall on the East Coast of North America. Vietnamese people from surrounding states, including but not limited to North Carolina, South Carolina, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, flock to Eden Center. So this quote-unquote redevelopment plan is much bigger than just the City of Falls Church. For nearly 40 years, we have cultivated a community that is vibrant and strong due to the circumstances we found ourselves in and continue to persevere. Whether we came after 1975, in the years after the US placed embargo, or as recent immigrants to this country. Right now, I live in Richmond, Virginia, where I've seen firsthand the consequences of displacement and gentrification. Look up Jackson Ward and what has happened to the quote-unquote Black Wall Street of the South. The city must prioritize the needs and demands of the Vietnamese people who come to and work at Eden Center, not up-and-coming white professionals, developers, and landlords. Prioritize the demands of the community first, as this plan cannot move forward without anti-displacement strategies or Little Saigon East, or else we are doomed to repeat the irony of Vietnamese people being displaced yet again by US governing bodies. There would be no quote-unquote East End without Eden Center. The Planning Commission must do more than simply recommend all of what we have asked to the City Council. You must fight for them. I yield my time. Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you. That's all the speakers we have.
That concludes it. Okay. Let me just check one last time. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak before we close the public hearing? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close out on the public hearing part of our agenda this evening. And now we'll move into the activities that the Planning Commission needs to take. Before I do that, let me just ask if there's any comments from our members here before we go into the staff report. Anybody have anything they'd like to say? Mr. Hyra?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Stevens, for allowing me to speak before we go into our formal going over the whole plan, and because I think it's really important to acknowledge all the speakers that came and all the viewpoints. I was just touched and heartened by everything everyone said about the importance of the Eden Center to them as homeland. And I think that we often think about different parcels and property as just property, and we don't think of it as somebody's homeland. But I hope that what was said today, that connects, that Eden Center is really important to people's memories, traditions, and to their heart. So I just hope that we take that into consideration when we're thinking about this plan and how we want it to move forward, with hopefully keeping every small business in place. So again, thank you so much for everyone who came out to speak. I applaud you.
Okay, very good. Any other comments? Okay, I think we can go into the staff report to precede our discussion and possible vote on resolution.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the commission. I'll introduce the item briefly before turning it over to our lead planner on this one, Ms. Emily Bazemore. So the request, the item on your agenda tonight, of course, is the East End Small Area Plan, and the request for the commission is to hold a public hearing, which you've already done, and then make your recommendation back to council on the item. Staff's recommendation is a positive recommendation on the language within the plan. You can see in the draft text that's included in your packet, there have been some revisions that have been made even since you all saw it last. Those changes are highlighted in red text. Just a reminder on what a small area plan is within the City of Falls Church context. Of course, a small area plan is a guide for future public and private decision-making for the area. And of course, these meetings tonight, of course, are not the beginning of the plan, the beginning of the effort, but of course the end of the road in terms of getting to a plan, and of course then the beginning of actually making these things happen. Of course, community engagement started back in November of 21 with our more traditionally formatted community kickoff meetings, and we ran the standard sort of suite of community engagement tools. Traditional community meetings, online and in-paper surveys, engaging with the city's advisory boards and commissions, planning commission, city council, and we've tried pop-up meetings in the past, but never with the success that we had in these. So I was really happy to have the help in getting the word out about the planning activity. We ran 4 pop-up meetings at the Eden Center, and it was just tremendous to see the number of people that came out, and hopefully a lot of those recommendations are already reflected in the plan. And of course, in addition to the plan language, we do also capture that engagement and our takeaways from it as staff in our pop-up report, which is included in your packet tonight. But with that, I'll turn it over to Emily Bazemore for a more complete presentation.
Thank you so much, Paul. Good evening, Planning Commission. Nice to see you all. Tonight, the Planning Commission is requested to hold a public hearing and make a recommendation to the City Council on the draft East End Small Area Plan. City Council is tentatively set to act on the plan at their regularly scheduled meeting on June 26th of 2023. Again, staff recommends that the Planning Commission make a positive recommendation to the City Council on the adoption of the plan. Jack, could we pull up page 1-4 of the introduction and background chapter? All right. This is just an aerial of POA 5. I wanted to take some time to note that in POA 5, there is the Eden Center. There's also BJ's, and there's 24-hour fitness and Coons and public storage. And you know, this document is a guiding document that will help with reinvestment strategies and creating that framework to show where our priorities lie and to create a vision and create goals for POA 5 for the East End area. Now I want to go back to the staff report, specifically to line 15 on page 2. And here we talk about the 4 different tables that you can find in the staff report, noting revisions made since the May 3rd Planning Commission work session, but also that City Council work session that happened later in May. We also have a table addressing the Viet Place letter as well as CCP's letter. Now I just want to hop all the way to the end of the staff report where you can find our timeline and just reiterate what Paul said. We began this process back in November of 2021. The plan and our process has changed drastically since then. We're nearing the end of the process. It's hard to believe. We're here with you guys tonight for action, and we go to the City Council at the end of this month for action. It's great to see you all. I'm going to turn the floor over to you all now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think it's now our turn to talk through any questions or comments that we have. Where we're headed is consideration of a recommendation. But first, let's go around and see what issues our members have. Who would like to start? Down on this side? Corey? No? Okay, very good. How about this side?
I mean, I don't have all that much. I mean, I can go. I mean,
Please.
I mean, in general, I think I made these comments last time, and I'm very pleased with where we wound up. It was a long road to get there, as you said. But in reading through the document today, I mean, I know we heard some comments tonight about make even stronger language, and perhaps there are targeted things we can do, and maybe other commissioners who have more expertise in that may look to amplify it. But I mean, I would say one thing that comes through loud and clear when you review the plan is the emphasis on maintaining the community asset that is the Eden Center, not just for Falls Church, but for the region and beyond. I mean, to me, that comes through loud and clear. I mean, for everything from the land use map, which has a business conservation, hatching overlay, to all the text that's in there. And again, the comp plan, as we've talked about, is a guiding document. And the key to get right in the comp plan is that overarching theme. And I think it achieves that as far as what we've heard loud and clear from the community. In addition to some of the other areas, I mean, obviously the main focus has been on the Eden Center, but there are the peripheral areas as well, adjacent to that. So by and large, I feel like it achieves that. I appreciate in the matrix. I think I had raised the question about renaming the street, and I saw somewhere, I think in the, maybe it was in the letter from the Eden Center management, that apparently Fairfax County and the city, like 20 years ago or 15 years ago, made some resolution to do that. So if we've already done that, and then the signs just are missing or something, we should look into fixing that. That would be an easy fix. So anyway, but yeah, I appreciate the looking into that aspect of it. But so by and large, I mean, I'm very pleased with where this has wound up. I think it's hitting at what we've heard, and I'm going to, of course, support recommending it for approval tonight. And again, I applaud the community for coming out and really sharing their views of Eden Center. I think all of us, we go to Eden Center, but none of us on the commission, it's not that I'm aware of, are formally part of the Vietnamese community. But I've learned a lot about how much it means. I knew it was important, but I've heard it loud and clear, and so it helped me to really understand how important it was that we get that message right. And I do feel that it comes through in the plan as I see it today. So, so that's where I'm at. And again, if there are ways we can amplify that or make some targeted improvements, we'll talk about it tonight. But overall, I'm ready to support it in its current form.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. How about on this side? Looks like Mr. Hyra, you have the floor.
I will make some comments about the plan, and I want to do this by trying to be balanced and do pros, because I think there are a lot of positive things about the process and also substance that's in this plan. But I also feel there are a lot of cons. There are a lot of negative things in here, some which we have control over and some we don't. But I think we need to acknowledge the cons, and then I want to come to the conclusion about how I feel, how I would vote for this plan. So let's just start with the pros. I thought that the city staff did a tremendous job with outreach. Initially, it was a little bumpy, but like you said, it started in November of 2021, and you went slow. You moved methodically. You took input. A lot of people in this room provided input that really changed the plan and inserted equity language in this plan. There's more equity language in this plan than I think any other small area plan in Falls Church City's history. That is a huge accomplishment to, again, many of the folks in this room, and I mean the planning commissioners, the staff, the landlord, and maybe potential developer, the Viet Place Collective, and just the council. I often, crack on our council, and I want to compliment the council because the signal was sent out to slow down, and Paul and your staff slowed down and got out to the community, heard people's thoughts, and I think injected a lot of equitable development language in this plan. We should celebrate that. That is a huge accomplishment for our city which often just drives forward with development to get it done, and not really thinking about everybody's voice. I thought there are more voices in this plan than pretty much every other plan we've ever had. So again, those are the positives. But let's talk about some of the cons and some of the negatives. One of the negatives is what I just heard today. I just heard the representative of the owner and the landlord come and say they just met Viet Place Collective yesterday. This plan started in November of 2021, and you just met with this collective yesterday? You never took them seriously. You're not taking the voice of this advocacy arm very seriously. Like, that's pretty disappointing to hear. Also, another thing, and this has been talked about by many of the speakers, was that there's a lot of equity language, but there's no teeth. There's no money behind that yet. That is really problematic. I've been studying place-based redevelopment for over 20 years. There's a lot of displacement that happens. This plan, as it states right now, is a plan of displacement. The displacement may not happen in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. It may happen in 10 years. It may happen in 20 years. But it is a plan of displacement because we have not put mechanisms in place to stop the displacement. We talk about we want to, we might, they're ideas, but there's no money behind that. And I've lived in Falls Church for almost 10 years, and we don't fund affordable housing. We don't do equitable development. We do development, but we don't do equitable development. Why should anyone believe that in 5 years or 10 years that we will have the political will to put in money behind the anti-displacement strategies? Also, it's not just our city. It's every city around the country. We are a country that displaces people. We've been doing it since our founding, but we can just go into the 20th century and, we have the old urban renewal, which was Negro removal, which was the removal of low and moderate income people of color. And now we have the new urban renewal, which is some of the things that we're doing, our small area plans, all incentivizing development. And it is likely going to lead to displacement here, and it has led to displacement all over the country. We just had the Great Uprise. A lot of that uprise, yes, was related to police brutality, but it was also related to the eviction wave that we had. It was also related to the knocking down of public housing. It was related to pushing vulnerable populations around. We, with this plan, as it states, are going to push a vulnerable population that's been pushed around for over 25, 30, 40, 50 years. Do you want to support a plan that is, as stated now, a displacement plan? I don't want to. I don't want to have my name attached to this. So what could we do? I don't want to just leave it like, let's just burn it to the ground. We could institute some real things that actually didn't come from me, came from the community representatives that just spoke. We could say the new tax money that is generated by any development, 10% of it goes to the anti-displacement strategies. We could have that in here. We don't. We could have a community benefits agreement. I know that was talked about last meeting, and there was some question, can we really do a community benefits agreement? People are doing community benefits agreements all around the country. I mean, just Google, type it, you'll see them. One's in DC, LA, wherever. I mean, there's other ones in Virginia. Of course we can do it if we have the political will. But what came back to us was, yes, in the special exception plan, the city will negotiate with the developer to get the benefits. That's not how community benefits plans work. It's advocates and advocacy folks that negotiate with the city. Then they dictate to the potential developer. We haven't ever done that in this city, but we could, but we don't seem like we want to do that with this plan. So there are a lot of opportunities to put stronger language, to put funding, to put promises behind a plan so that in 5 to 10 years, we don't have displacement. But we as a city, have not. This is going to be a displacement plan. I will not vote for it.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Commissioner Clement, anything you would like to say?
Hard to follow Derek. I'm curious about the idea of funding decisions or recommendations being in a small area plan. My understanding is that that's not really typically how these are written. Those are council decisions that are made, and we as the Planning Commission don't really have any sort of fiscal responsibility. Am I correct in that, Paul? Could you edify us?
Yeah, there's sort of a standard language disclaimer, and some of this goes back to some of our comp plans, probably the 2014 era of comp plan updates, where we started putting price tags on some of these projects that were included, whether it was a park redevelopment or a park redesign, right, Parks for People, and we talked about, well, what do we think it's going to cost to clean up Cherry Hill Park or to invest in green streets, and we started identifying some of the funding mechanisms for these, whether it's local funding or particular grant programs, and what the local share of those things would be. And we started laying it out in such detail that someone said, wait, is this a budget? And so we started, at the request of council, we started clarifying. We didn't want the public confused. This isn't a budget. Just because we wrote it down with the dollar number and the funding stream doesn't actually mean we're authorized to spend that money. So there is a standard disclaimer that we put in small area plans, comprehensive plan chapters that says, here's the guide, here's how much we think this might cost, here's a way you might fund it. Just realize this doesn't actually enact a budget or authorize expenditures. So yes, the plan lays out the framework, and when we for some of these items we have been able to identify sort of rough costs as well as potential funding streams.
Thank you. So it could be possible that we could include an additional recommendation to council that new tax revenue percentages go to Eden Center businesses, or we could incorporate something like that into the plan. But it would only be a recommendation from the Planning Commission. It would not actually be, it would be something that council would themselves consider at a future time, right?
Right. Yeah. So So any recommendation you all make, one, council's obviously going to first consider it when they hear this later this month, and then when they actually sort of committed funding to it, then that would be a separate sort of budgeting discussion. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I do think that I would prefer to keep the name Little Saigon East in the plan.
Mm-hmm.
That I didn't catch actually that was completely removed. So
we struggled with that a little bit. I think it's a good idea, right? It identifies, one of the predominant sort of activities in the area, right? It's the Eden Center and the Vietnamese heritage. One of the things we sort of talked through at the staff level is that it's not just Vietnamese, right? There's a wider Asian sort of culture there. For example, the Good Fortune Grocer, I think is financed through a Chinese group, and so there is sort of a larger sort of Asian sort of character to the area, although obviously Vietnamese is most well known. And then there are also cultures and histories that have been there. There's the history of African American ownership of the land, which then sort of passed over, and there are other groups that have lived there over time. And so I think we struggled a little bit to identify one specific culture that we wanted to assign to the entire POA, and that's why we said, wait a second, that's obviously a major focus, but let's actually have a conversation about, is that the right name, and are there other groups that need to be represented as well?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to have a a larger planning discussion about it, but I think in this plan, I think it makes sense on page 2-3, creating a cultural district, to just note that the Vietnamese community who patronize Eden Center strongly support the name Little Saigon East for the cultural district. It's not saying that is going to be the final name, because there's going to be a subsequent process where that will be decided, but I think including that for posterity makes sense and it responds to something that the community wants.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, and we didn't want to lose that comment, so we did actually include all the comment letters we received, or from certainly Viet Place as well as boards and commissions. We actually did include those as a copy and paste in the community engagement chapter of the plan, and so that those recommendations would always survive as part of the planning document.
Yeah, that makes sense, but I'd also personally, I would like to see it on page 2-3, creating a cultural district at the end of that paragraph. Otherwise, I support the plan. I mean, we need a plan for this area, and Eden Center is a huge part of it, but there are other properties in this area too that need attention. I feel like the plan definitely centers Eden Center as a key attribute for the East End, and it has a vision for much needed housing on a key transportation corridor, better walkability, better bicycle infrastructure, more greenery, more parks. I think these are all things that we would like to see in that area, so I would like to support the plan tonight.
Mr. Fuentes?
Thank you. Thank you to my commissioners. A lot of great comments. I do agree the plan is greatly improved. I've learned a lot from this process. I think the whole city has. I think it's going to make us do things better in the future. The process is certainly improved. Clearly, the anti-displacement piece is the big challenge. As Mr. Hyra said, this is something that's not unique to Falls Church. We're wrestling with this all over the country. I do work on this as well, and he's exactly right. If without money, the policies are difficult to have any teeth, but I don't know when we do that. I don't think this is the right point. So I would support language that encourages council to figure out ways to fund this, whether it's encouraging them or whether it stipulates it or something. But there clearly has to be funding behind those initiatives, because I do believe that if we do it right here, it would have ripple effects throughout the region. I think one of the commenters mentioned that. There's no reason why Falls Church can't be the best, as opposed to what Mr. Iris said, which is not great. So, I'd love to see us reverse that, our history on that. I do agree with the speaker who said that this does exist in a bigger context, judging from the number of folks from around the region who came out to speak, and that's really important for us. Usually we get very hyper-local people commenting on things here, and so this is really great to see this bigger regional context, and I learned a lot from that as well. I would support including Little Saigon East as a potential name. I don't really feel that strongly about it, but clearly folks do. But I would support a potential future name change with that. That's fine with me. But I would support the plan tonight as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of wise words from fellow commissioners and from everybody who's participated in this process. And I also want to acknowledge, I think, the great work that staff has done in listening and engaging with the community, and the tremendous work that the community has done in participating and engaging. And I hope everybody who's here tonight and the Viet Place Collective sort of see. I think one of the advantages of living in a small, in a small community, this Falls Church being a small community, is you really can get involved, and it's work and it's time and it's effort, and it can feel confusing, especially at the start, and technical and overwhelming, and there are a lot of questions. But I hope that you see the results of all of your efforts here. And I hope it's also clear that this really is just a start. This is the first step, as one of you said. It's the small area plan, and I think about how we use these small area plans when developments come through. We are looking at these plans, and we're often looking at them, 5-10 years after they were developed, right? And there's a lot in them. So one, they're useful, but two, they're just only one piece of the puzzle. They really are. So I think the funding piece, like different tools, different ways of engaging, I think are really important for the city to continue to work. And I think for the people here to continue to engage on, like, it doesn't stop here. Like, if City Council approves this next week, there's still the issue of funding. There's still the issue of what is a community benefits agreement? How does that work in Falls Church? I mean, there should be advocacy. I will note that the City Council has a work plan. It's a 2-year work plan, 1 year, I can't remember. It's 4-year. they look at it every 2 year. I knew, there we go. It's a 2-year work plan. And I'm bringing that up now because I think as a member of various, of the Environmental Sustainability Council previously, and, having been on this commission now for, this is the end of my 4th year, we want to do a lot of things. But if it doesn't show up in City Council's work plan, it doesn't necessarily happen unless there is a lot of public engagement. I don't know, I'm trying to think it. So I think advocate to get this on City Council's work plan, right? And I think maybe we as a planning commission might want to consider adding some language to our resolution, like the recommendation that, we recommend that City Council actively consider policies and funding to enact this. Yeah, because a lot of these small area plans, the strategies sit there, but they're not necessarily put into place because resources are constrained. So I think if we really want to see funding and we want to explore a community benefits agreement, I don't know what that is. I need to learn more about it before I can really recommend it, but I would certainly recommend that the city explore it if that's an important piece of the puzzle.
And I think that was in the staff memo, that there still needs to be further exploration of the.
There was. But I think we can bring that up into the recommendation.
Sure.
Just specifically ask
Right.
City Council to do it.
Yeah.
So anyway, I am supportive of the plan. I think it's come a long way, and I'm really feel pretty good about it. But we might want to consider adding a few more notes to the resolution.
Sure, when we get to the motion, we can, if you have some words in mind, that would be good to add it at that point. Ms. Freelander, any comments?
I actually am in support of the plan. I think it's come a very long way from when we first have seen it, and I've seen it on the AAB as well. And so I appreciate all the community outreach, all the community input and feedback. And I think it's really a much stronger plan because that dynamic tension between all the different interests. So I'm in support of the plan, knowing that the way that the small area plans are used is as a guideline when development happens. And it gives us a tool to look at it through a certain lens when we get a special exception or when we get any kind of action in front of us. So I think it's a very good guideline for that. And so I'm in support of it. And I echo a lot of the comments by my other commissioners. Thank you.
Okay, well, I have a few comments that I'd like to share. First of all, I echo the appreciation of the meeting that was held between the Viet Place Collective and the Eden Center Management. Yes, it would have been good to have had that 6 months or more ago, but the fact is that Councilmember Hardy arranged for that, and I think it was very positive and hopefully just the first of many of those meetings that could go a long way towards resolving issues. There's this concept of subsidiarity, which is where you try to address and handle issues at the level closest to where the problems are. And so I think that thought occurs to me here. Yes, there are some public policy issues that the city will need to act on, but many of the issues are really involving the tenants and the landlord, and there's not a lot of ways for us to get in the middle of that without creating a whole lot of problems. So again, I'm just very pleased for that meeting, and I would certainly encourage the Eden Center management to look for ways to continue that process. I think it's very positive. So I've been through about half a dozen of these small area plans, and this one is by far the most unique. And I think our wake-up call was the listening session that we had in January. It let us know that we had to tread very carefully on this plan, and that gathering community input had to be tailored to the unique circumstances of the people who work in this small area of our city. So I think it needs repeating that the small area plan provides a vision, but it's not an implementation plan. The state requires that we do planning, and I think that's a good idea. And public input is a key part of that planning process, and I am really grateful that we have had so much public input on this issue. After the January listening session, I'm very pleased with our colleagues here who immediately recognized that we needed to slow down, take another look, a fresh look at how we gather public input, and staff, I thought, jumped up to this opportunity and challenge very well. I think you're to be congratulated for the pop-up sessions, having participated in several of those. I know that they were heartfelt, sincere, and hopefully it kind of awakened a new opportunity in the city to embrace a part of the city that for too long we just have not. So the current draft recommends a lot of changes, things like establishing a cultural overlay district, naming it Little Saigon East, and by the way, I do agree with my colleagues who have said that for our recommendation, it would be a good idea to go ahead and include that. Other issues like narrowing Wilson Boulevard, there's a number of these. But it's important, again, to state that this plan makes no decisions on any of these. Rather, I look at it as a catalyst for further discussions down the road. And City Council action in particular has to take place. They are the ones that control the budget. We have to be mindful of that. So I'm appreciative of the input from the public, especially those with strong ties to the Eden Center. What I hope that will happen next is that we'll get a lot more discussion between the groups such as the Via Place Collective and the Eden Center management. But beyond that, I'm prepared to vote in favor of this. Unless there are any other comments or points of discussion. Well, first of all, I should ask you, Mr. Stoddard, is there anything else that you would like to say before we consider the motion?
No, I think it's, like you said, it's been a very sort of full sort of public participation process, and I think it's probably the thing that staff planners were pretty excited to do, because it's the kind of things we always talk about, and sometimes we're a little jealous when other jurisdictions can do it and we can't. So we were very happy to do it. And actually, the level of engagement at the regional level, two of the big topics that planning directors are talking about regionally is meeting the housing crisis that's gripping, certainly this region, of course, other regions as well, but ours here, a little close to home, and then also displacement. That as we think about sort of solving the housing crisis by turning sort of strip centers into housing, well, what does that mean for the thriving businesses and communities that are already in those strip centers? So those two conversations need to be had at the same time. And actually, the investment in public engagement and the input from the community has actually generated enough sort of awareness of this regionally that we've actually been asked by the Regional Planning Directors Group to give a presentation on how did we engage the community and how did we sort of rewrite the language in our small area plans to incorporate that. So I think it's exciting where we landed, and I do think it's important to think about sort of what are the right ways from using this as the launching point to then have those follow-on conversations about whether it's committing funding streams or what does the structure of this look like. Is it small businesses specific to this area? Is it small business support on a citywide scale? Think through some of those issues.
Okay, well, thank you for those comments. With that in hand, is anyone would like to go ahead and make a motion? We had a couple of suggestions for some edits, so we can all engage in that as well.
I can try. I'm not sure where to add an amendment or a recommendation to council. I think in the therefore paragraph.
Yeah.
Okay.
You there, yeah.
So whereas the East End Small Area Plan establishes a vision for the East End as a vibrant destination that serves as a gateway into the city of Falls Church, honors cultural ties, and promotes equitable and sustainable investments. And whereas the plan calls for the preservation of nearby housing affordability and the introduction of housing opportunities into the planning opportunity area. And whereas the plan encourages transportation investments that put people first by prioritizing connectivity and accessibility. Whereas the plan identifies long-term strategies to help revitalize the plan's vision. And whereas the concepts in the plan are meant to be a conceptual framework for reinvestments and public improvements to provide a starting point for public and private investment into general improvements to the area and do not constitute changes to the city's comprehensive plan, future land use map, zoning ordinance, or zoning map. Now therefore, I move that the City of Falls Church Planning Commission hereby endorses the East End Small Area Plan as a guiding document in the decision-making for the planning, zoning, and development review, capital improvements, city regulations and policies, and that it be referenced in the city's comprehensive plan, provided City Council commit to fully funding the anti-displacement toolkit as identified in the small area plan, and direct staff to develop a strategy for utilizing community benefits agreements as a way to ensure anti-displacement policies. Further, the city should consider Little Saigon East as a potential future name
Cultural overlay district.
Pardon me?
Of the cultural.
of the cultural district.
Overlay district, yeah.
Overlay district.
Yep.
Is that clear?
Did, Mr. Trainer, did that
Yeah, we may need
come
to.
through? Okay, is there a second?
Really quickly,
Yeah. Sorry, that was provided.
Did you write it down?
Provide City Council commit to fully funding the anti-displacement toolkit as identified in the small area plan and direct staff to develop a strategy for utilizing community benefits agreements. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, commit to fully,
Funding the anti-displacement toolkit as identified in the small area plan and direct staff to develop a strategy for utilizing community benefits agreements as a way to ensure anti-displacement in the area.
utilize a strategy to,
To direct staff to develop a strategy. Go back a couple words, Chuck.
direct staff to utilize a strategy.
Hold on. So, and direct staff to develop a strategy to utilize community development agreements,
Community benefit.
community benefits agreements.
As a way to ensure the anti-displacement in the area. Or,
Guard against displacement.
Wait,
As a way to guard
oh,
against
to,
displacement.
yeah.
that's better. As a way to guard against the anti-displacement in the area.
Guard against displacement.
Oh, right. That's right.
In the area.
And then your Little Saigon, Mr. Prentice.
What does it
Rob.
say earlier? I can't.
I think further, the city should,
What's the question?
The Little Saigon East name.
Yeah,
Where
so
we
do
put that.
we should put that in this part here? Okay.
Or I guess it could be a whereas, but
We still need a second.
Is it
We
further?
need a motion first, we got to second it, and then we can debate it.
Well, I think
Are we-
Rob's still making his motion
Right,
here.
so he has to make it first, and then we need to second it.
Okay. Then
If
I
there-
think he's done with his,
Well, your language for Little Saigon East hasn't made it in yet. Did you want that in here as well?
you want to do that after the second,
as an amendment, do you want to do it as an amendment?
or can someone else add to that as still part of the, before
Well,
we
he's still
get?
making, I think you're, like mechanically, you're still making your motion, right?
Okay.
So you can,
Right.
no one seconded it yet, so you
him
can.
While he is making the motion.
Was it, and that the name Little Saigon East
Yeah,
be
we
considered for the name of the cultural district?
yeah.
Perfect.
So I'd really like it specifically to be in that section of the plan, 2-3.
Oh, you can do that instead.
Yeah, if you can do that, then
Yeah, we'll just do that.
if you could just make that change, reinsert it in 2-3.
That's-
We don't need to put it in the motion.
Thank
Yep.
you, that's much easier.
Okay. I'd rather these be cleaner for,
Yeah, so we'll have that in before the packet gets posted for council.
thank you.
Okay. are
So
we
now
ready
you have a
for
motion,
second?
now you need a second.
I will second it for discussion. One thing, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm married to one. And the word provided, to me, I don't like that word provided, because that makes it sound like it's all predicated on them fully funding that. Now, I agree, it would be great if they fully funded it, but I don't think I wouldn't support it. I recommend they approve this plan if it's not fully, funded. I think we can strongly recommend that they do that as part of it. That would be my.
Encourage rather than provided?
So that would be my recommended amendment, is to change that to a recommendation as opposed to a predication.
As a new sentence. Just end the sentence. Further, the planning commission recommends that.
Eh,
Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Okay, and just also, since we're, just for discussion purposes, I mean, one thing I just want to also say, and since I went first, and then, there were a lot of other comments made, just to make it also clear that, again, with the comp plan, I mean, it's a guide, but it is very important, and I think the elements that are the most important are the recommendations in the land use map, which strongly, which would unequivocally talk about preserving the Eden Center. It talks about making some targeted improvements to it, so to me, like, the language is crystal clear as far as, how is the plan used when someone comes in for any kind of project. That's the first thing you're gonna look at to see whether or not it's something that should be pursued. And I think it's very clear. Now, again, we kind of have it's a unique situation. There's one landlord that owns the whole property. So in that sense, it's kind of maybe there are pros and cons to that, but the pro is, you have one person one piece of property you're dealing with, and those representatives are here and seem to be endorsing that. So, to me, the most important thing to get right are those parts, and that to me is right in this. And it's not excluding other strategies. It's not closing the door on the city council and the Economic Development Authority and other groups in the city looking for strategies to help support small businesses in the Eden Center and elsewhere in the city. So it's by no means closing the door on further discussion on that point, But what's most important as a comp plan element or a small area plan is that it gets those recommendations right for land use, future zoning, future development form, scale, all that, and I think it gets it right. So for all those reasons, I'm going to support it. I'm going to support the motion with the edits we just made. I'm okay with the Saigon East thing. It's a difficult issue for me to wade into, and not really being well, I think, educated enough in sort of the cultural touchstone that name has or could be. So I'll leave that for the council to wrestle with. But I'm okay including it in our recommendation, and so with the changes we just talked about, I'm going to support the motion.
And I'll just make a passing comment that I think this issue of anti-displacement really needs to take place in terms of the city as a whole. I don't think it makes any sense to have anti-displacement discussed just in one area of the city. So I don't recommend any changes here. I'm happy to vote for this, but I would strongly encourage City Council to look at this on a broader basis. And as someone mentioned earlier, I think it's an issue that probably deserves to be on the next 2-year work plan for City Council. Any other comments?
To that end, actually, I would suggest, because I agree with you, and I just hit the reader over the head with it in our recommendation. So I would suggest, first of all, calling attention to the sentence by making it a new paragraph so it stands out a little bit more, which is a minor thing. But I would just add, we end the sentence like in the area, which I think means the capital A area. But I think we should add a phrase that says, as well as the rest of the city of Falls Church. I mean, this isn't an opportunity. Yeah.
I thought about that. I just didn't know if it was.
I don't know. In the small area plan, I think we should just be clear, like in the East End as well as the rest of the city of Falls Church. This is an opportunity.
I feel like this plan, though, is really about the East End specifically. So I agree that there should be a larger effort to develop anti-displacement.
I think we're
policies for the
recommending
whole
the
city.
plan, but we can say, look, this is something that needs to happen more broadly. So we're not just talking about anti-displacement here, like it's essential here, but don't think, like, if you can't find the time in your work plan to dedicate to the Eden Center, remember, this is for all of the city of Falls Church. This is an opportunity.
Sure.
Use it as an incubator. And so I'd just like to add the phrase, like, as well as in the rest of the city, just to be clear
Yeah,
on that.
I guess I didn't recommend adding it for the reason that Commissioner Comont mentioned, that this is focused on the East End. But as we go through this, we do learn things that should apply to the city as a whole, and maybe just some other channel that we should communicate that. Plus, they'll be looking at the recording, so I think they're going to hear our discussion, and I think it's going to get there.
Over-communicating is
Yes.
always a good thing.
Absolutely.
Just mechanically, if you're going to change your motion at this point, you need to get acceptance by the maker of the motion as well as the seconder.
I accept the amendment.
I think we should delete in the rest of the city part. I just think we should be targeted to this. We're making a motion recommending this plan. I mean, we can put all kinds of stuff we like in here, but it's more effective if we focus on what the council's going to be doing with it, so.
I agree. Would you accept the discussion a few minutes ago? Okay.
I will consent to deleting it. I do
Spinelessly
think
accede to our most outrageous
I will
demand.
fold
Yes.
like a lawn chair, but I do think it's a missed opportunity.
Right, okay.
I see one city council member here.
All right, any other comments before we call for a vote? It looks like we are ready, Mr. Trainer, to.
All right. Ms. Friedlander,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss,
Yes.
Mr. Krasner,
Yes.
Mr. Puentes,
Yes.
Ms. Comont,
Yes.
Mr. Hyra,
No.
Mr. Stevens.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you to everyone who was involved with this. More to come.
Thank you all.
All right, so we are on to adoption of our minutes, I believe. Does anyone have any recommended changes to the May 3rd minutes? Seeing none, would
I
someone?
move we adopt the minutes from our meeting of May 3rd, 2023.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Trainer?
Ms. Friedlander,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss,
Abstain.
Mr. Krasner,
Yes.
Mr. Puentes, Ms. Comont,
Yes.
Mr. Hyra,
Yes.
Mr. Stevens.
Yes.
The minutes are adopted.
Motion passes. All right, now we're on to the fun part, information items. The first item is Planning Commissioner's reports. Does anyone have any reports that they would like to share?
I just have a question, just following up on that last discussion. So on community benefits agreements, I mean, I think it's a very interesting idea. If the substitution was a special exception, to me, that implies that it's something that happens in the context of a development, like a plan. And so if we're exploring community benefits agreements, but there's no imminent development in Eden Center, we're not going to learn about it. We're not going to build that muscle, figure it out until development happens. And then when a development's proposed, resources will be so stretched that we'll just default to the usual way of doing business unless we explore it earlier. And so part of the reason why I want to find a way to communicate that we should explore it in the rest of the city is because if it's a real tool that we think we should be using, then we should start understanding it and figure out how to use it. And if there is another development that's whatever, like we should know how it works before development happens in the Eden Center.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I thought that's why it was in the staff memo that it was an issue that had to be explored. I have no idea how it works. I know what the city does on special exceptions and how that process works, but this broader concept of, community benefit, I need help on. So I would fully agree with you.
And also my interest was just in actually knowing if we actually can use them in Virginia. I did look and I couldn't find any examples. Maybe you did, but we have tight restrictions as a locality, what we can do in Virginia. They have been used all over the place. LA is a great example. It's more inclusive, I think, with the community. It's a different process than what we do with the special exceptions, which I think has had some success. But I'd like to see maybe we can use the CBAs as a better way to use it.
But I guess what's the concrete action? I mean, our ability to act is to include recommendations. So now we don't have a recommendation. So yes, it is in the memo, but then what? I mean.
We hold them to it.
We could always send we could send a letter to council, just say, like underlining our support about just this. Like if somebody would like to draft one, I'm happy to help.
Would you like to draft something for our next meeting, and we can?
I mean, it'll be a one-liner, please explore community benefits agreement, because or maybe it's just a request to staff.
We need to learn more about.
Yeah, I think we just do it.
We need to learn more about how it would work in the city.
Like, we have Fridays. I mean, we do this kind of stuff.
I mean, I think before we can make a recommendation, I think we need to learn. I mean, I'm not familiar with that either in this side of the river. I know in DC, it's common with like the neighborhood, the ANCs, to do it with developers when there are things going on. I don't know. I just don't know how it would work here and which part of the community is benefiting from the agreement and, who and what and like just because it's a legally binding type of thing once it's done. And so it's negotiated between, that community and the developer. And so under Virginia law, I'm just not familiar if there's enabling legislation under the Virginia statutes that allow it, and if so, under what parameters and how it's done. I'm just not familiar with it.
So I think to your point, the first step is staff, and particularly legal review. We kind of learn through
like everything else in Virginia. The first thing to check, right, is are we enabled under state?
We kind of went through the whole T-zone process and had several legal interpretations, let's say, and we saw what happened. How much there was a change once we got to that. So I think going to staff, as we've done here tonight, is the first step.
I've never heard of us using it. Doesn't mean we couldn't do it, but Virginia's all about the proffers.
We should know about
the proffer system. I don't know. I've never heard of the community benefit kind of thing, but maybe it is allowed, and we just have never done it.
There are a number of tools, development tools that we don't use in the city of Falls Church, some of which we are able to use because neighboring jurisdictions use them, but we, for various reasons I don't fully understand, don't.
You always have to check state code because in Virginia some
I'm
jurisdictions.
talking about like density bonus, but I think it's like if we're going to change the way we develop, we have to start with, is it allowable? So can staff follow up with us and just thank you.
Some counties and cities can do things in the state that others can't because there's laws that were specifically passed for those cities and counties, and sometimes you have to lobby in Richmond, get your delegate and senator to, get something passed that lets you do it. So I don't know if that's even the case here, though, so we'll have to look into it.
There may not have been a real great example where we could have used it before, but this is a good example. This, if we can't use it here, then we're not going to be able to.
Okay, are there any reports that commissioners would like to make? Down this end? No? How about this side? No? I do have one, just real briefly. The Economic Development Authority meeting was last evening, and I attended. And it sounds like they might have a good candidate for the restaurant at Founders Row 1 to replace the City Works that kind of, evaporated during the pandemic. Obviously, more to learn about that, but that was encouraging. That would leave only 3 open spaces at Founders Row 1, so they do appear to be making good progress on finally bringing to life those boarded commercial spaces on the first floor. And I did attend a very interesting conference hosted by the Strong Towns Organization and Congress for the New Urbanism. I won't go into that this evening, but my head's still trying to recover from 4 intense days. But I'll try to sort out some of the highlights from that and share that at a future meeting. But that's all I had. So looks like anything else? Okay, I think we can go on to the director's report with Mr. Stoddard.
All right, thank you, Mr. Stevens. Thank you, members of the commission. Before I forget, just looking ahead at your agenda, I may need to revisit the June 21st agenda. I think we had slated as sort of holding a large portion of that meeting for a T-Zones work session, but I don't think there will be a new sort of council first reading in between now and then. We do have another speaker series lined up with Hillary Orr, the Deputy Director of Transportation for Alexandria, City of Alexandria, was going to come and talk about their successes with their Vision Zero program, how they got it started many years ago, and the capacity they had to build to get to where they are now. I had reached out to them just because I was personally impressed with how much they'd completed in the years since I lived there. It was really quite impressive to see when I traveled through. So she's available that night, and I think it would be a great chance to hear what Alexandria is doing. So I need to look to see if I can maybe find some other items to maybe fill out that agenda. Otherwise, looking ahead, we may want to think about canceling the July 5th meeting. It is the day after July 4th. I don't know how many folks are going to be in town. I know I won't be in town. But then
I won't be in town.
Oh, all right. So do we want to take just sort of a, okay, I'm seeing lots of shaking heads. Maybe we just do a quorum call. Is anyone going to be in on July 5th? Raise your hand. I see one.
I think I will actually be here on July 5th.
All right. So we got two.
Quickly find a trip to take.
All right. So I don't think we have a quorum for July 5th. So I think, Mr. Chair, maybe you and I can just chat offline about whether we really sort of officially want to cancel that one.
Happy to do that.
Okay. You would have a required meeting then. You have to meet every month. For July 19th, you do have action items, or not action items, sorry, but information items and discussion items already scheduled for that night. Your review of the Community Energy Action Plan. And again, I'll have to check on the schedule for T-Zones. So that's the schedule looking ahead. Any questions on schedule? I know I owe you some updates on that. Otherwise, I'll go ahead to the written report. And there are two items in here, and a little unusual for a director's report. I'd be happy to sort of invite some conversation on the first item, the comprehensive plan status report. So this was pulled together by our senior planner, Emily Bazemore, who was here earlier tonight. But what Emily had done is sort of tried to deliver on that message as part of the fiscal 24. The fiscal year 2024 budget, this idea of growing with vision. And for the planning shop, usually what that means is going back and taking those plans off the shelf and making sure that they're still relevant, they're appropriate for the community today, they're providing adequate vision going forward. So we looked at the comprehensive plan and looked at what's the status of the plan, what is required under state code, where are we on the elements that we can optionally include. And so we might jump to that first attachment. Here we go. Let me pull it up on my screen as well, just so I can zip around it. So as I said, it's sort of a status report or a status check, a health check on the city's comprehensive plan. The opening table is the comprehensive plan chapters, and they're laid out in order of most recent either adoption or amendment. You can see the most recent were the environment chapter, demographics and housing a complete community in 2020 and 2019. Then there's a bit of a pause. The vision chapter is now from 2017, and it's really remarkable to think about everything that's happened in the city since 2017. We've had groundbreaking on West Falls, of course. You've got groundbreaking on Founders Row 2, Broad and Washington. You're closing to commercial. You have commercial tenant fit outs in Founders Row 1. So really quite a bit of activity since that 2017. And of course, we're on the other side of COVID. Or at least we're over the hump of COVID. And then other chapters that I think probably still think, oh yeah, I remember working on that. Parks for People, Mobility for All Modes. Those are actually 9 and 8
Close
years
to your
old
heart,
now.
right?
And then some of the others that never got another look when we did those updates in the mid-teens. Public facilities, community character. Although we did do the public art amendment in 2021. Historic preservation, and then the land use map and the land use chapter have been updated largely on a case-by-case basis in response to applications. The rest of this is sort of pulling snippets out of the state code in that middle column, and then in the far right column, it's walking through what's the status of that element within the city's comprehensive plan. So it's a lot of information, and I don't want to sort of go through it in maybe in detail, so I'll touch on some of them in summary in terms of, having a transportation plan with a map of proposed improvements as well as expected costs, emphasizing transit-oriented development, talking about having sufficient housing capacity to meet the needs of the community at all income levels over an appropriate time planning horizon, making a study of public facilities and making sure that what we have is adequate to meet that housing demand and the expected employment growth. And here are some things that just sort of happened in state code that maybe the community, the city didn't keep up with. Broadband infrastructure, you're required to have a plan for that. We actually don't mention broadband infrastructure in our comprehensive plan, so that's a gap. Plans for general development, identification of urban development areas, which we've done, and some elements that aren't relevant because of the geography. We don't have to worry about coastal resource management or sea level rise. We do have recurrent flooding in the city, but that code section is actually specific to Hampton Roads. They suffer tidal flooding. It's pretty
Smoke in
terrible.
the air.
Yeah. Well, that's hopefully that's all gone in several days. So I just wanted to sort of share this with you all as the keepers of the city's comprehensive plan, and maybe invite a little bit of discussion. We're already procuring services to update demographic projections. With that, we'll be getting an update to our population projections, similar to what we typically do for COG. We'll get employment projections, and we'll get housing projections. And this time we're partnering with HHS as well as the schools. So when we do population projections, we'll be getting not only the typical sort of 5-year totals, but we'll be getting what the schools need really for their facility planning needs, which is a year-by-year breakdown of expected sort of pupil generation at each grade level. And then what HHS is going to help us add to the review, to the projections, is a breakout looking forward to not just how many housing units do we need, but at what household makeup and at what AMI level. There's a pretty nice summary chart that we're using as the model out of Arlington County's housing plan. I think it's probably served them well for a while. It's this one sort of benchmark table that they have that says, look, over the next 20 years, here's the expected household composition and the AMI levels of all those households. And you can use that chart to understand, well, what kind of housing do we really need to be supplying for the next generation. So that's demographics is underway. We're starting procurement anyway, but I wanted to sort of answer questions, solicit feedback on, as you think about the comprehensive plan and the components within it, which ones really stand out to you all as maybe most in need of sort of attention or a revisit?
Reaction?
I would vote for the community facilities, public utilities, and government services plan, which it sounds like you all started updating. It occurs to me that maybe broadband could be included in that plan. That could be considered a public utility. So that would be the top of my list. I do wonder how were the original chapters decided? How do we decide these topics? Are we married to these topics, or I'm just wondering if we're looking at do we need to update all of these existing plans, or are they even the right plans? Like, should we be planning for something totally different? I looked at Arlington's comprehensive plan. They have completely different chapters, and they have some much more specific chapters on stormwater management, sanitary sewer. So I guess I'm just wondering, like, if we're going to be dedicating the resources, I want to make sure that we're working on the right topics. So how was that decided? Were the topics chosen by council? Were they chosen 25 years ago?
Yeah, so the chapter titles date back to 1997 or thereabouts, and they were maintained through, I think, the 2005 update. And then what had been attempted, it's organized functionally, right? So you look at a city planning topic, and there's a chapter for it. Sometimes there's been a little bit of confusion that sometimes people will say, oh, that's the department's plan. Like, nope, it's the community's plan, right? There's something in all these chapters for everyone, that everyone has a stake in utilities. Everyone has a stake in open spaces. Everyone has a stake in transportation. Because if those things don't work, then the community doesn't work. So they are sort of topic-based chapters, it's fairly easy to make the crosswalk from the state enabling legislation of you have to have a transportation map, you have to have a housing plan, you have to have a utilities plan, you have to do. So it's a pretty easy crosswalk. The other, the Arlington plan is sort of in some ways similar. You know, they have a general land use map, they have a transportation plan, and then you're right, they have much more specific plans that they've mechanically adopted into their comprehensive plan as an element of it. Typically what Falls Church has done is have sort of related master plans, for example, the bus stop master plan, the stormwater master plan. So we flag these as things that are guiding documents, but we don't necessarily link them in necessarily to the comprehensive plan. The other way, and this would really be sort of flipping sort of planning in the city sort of sideways from what it does now, but other communities have done it successfully, and that's organizing the plan around values instead of chapters. Typically what happens is communities spend millions of dollars on sort of pop-up events and concerts and giveaways and T-shirts, and they spend 3 years talking to the community about how to structure the plan. So it's really an undertaking. The way we've successfully done our most recent updates is about 9 months of internal staff time with 2 or 3 people working on it half-time, and we were able to get through sort of 1 or 2 chapters every 9 to 12 months that way. So we've had more success using in-house resources. It is hard to make those budget requests for, you know, $100,000+ sort of planning items, and sort of working with what we've got and revising it has been a successful model.
Yeah, I don't. I wouldn't want to look outside of our very capable staff for updating these chapters. I guess I'm just wondering if these are still and it's a question for my fellow commissioners too. I mean, I think all of these things are very important, and I'm just wondering if there's anything that we're missing, or that we might be able to learn from other jurisdictions. I like the specificity of these plans. I don't know that I would be in favor of some sort of values-based plan. It sounds a little squishy.
We have sort of values light. If you look at the vision chapter was actually making a pass at that, where we said, look, there is an overarching vision for the community, and these are the values that are important to it, the 3 legs of sustainability and core services. And those values should be reflected in all of the chapters going forward.
Yeah, and that makes sense for that to be the introduction and vision for the community. So, well, my vote is for the community facilities, public utilities, and government services, with the consideration of including broadband in there.
Any other thoughts?
Just a quick question on the broadband. I mean, wasn't that introduced at the state level for like rural Southwest Virginia, places that don't have access to broadband? I mean, wouldn't that be pretty simple for us to incorporate in our plan? Because it's pretty ubiquitous here.
Yeah, we have obviously a lot of our facility providers.
We have like multiple layers of like,
right, and I think it would be important to document them. It came up just, you know, most of obviously the city's running its own sewer system. Water is provided by Fairfax Water, electricity from Dominion, and we don't have a solar field. It is still worth having that conversation. I know just recently council was working with a city resident to get their home off of a failing septic system, and so it is always worth sort of taking a pause and making sure that the utility infrastructure is running the way it should. I know we've looked at things like our subdivisions went in the for the most part in the 50s. Well, did we have the right infrastructure going at the time? Did we get enough fire protection? Do we have the right fire hydrants at the right spacing to meet what fire departments are looking for these days? So I think that, do we have the right water pressure in the city? I remember when I first started working here, people complaining about the power always goes out. The water is always low pressure in this area of the city. It's not something we would fix, but it's something we could identify and start working with service providers on. Or if there is an area of the city that doesn't have enough options for broadband, or fiber optic cable isn't running in a particular neighborhood.
I think it's available everywhere, but I don't know. Could be wrong. I think broadband's available everywhere in the city, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I guess if it's required, but the state requires us to do it, so we got to do it.
Right.
Hopefully, it wouldn't take that much effort to, add that to it.
Well, and it would be a place to say, well, gosh, do we want small cell towers sitting on the top of all our utility poles, or actually do we want to have some guidance around, how we want to manage that?
Commissioner Friedlander?
I'd like to, I mean, I echo what Ms. Kamant is suggesting, especially in terms of utilities, and I think that actually goes hand in hand with Chapter 3 as well, with the urban design characteristics, because I mean, that was last visited in 2005, which was pre a lot of very large-scale developments, which also do impact our infrastructure in terms of sewage as well as main supply of water and electricity, and how that electricity is coming into that building, whether it's undergrounded or whatever. So I think those things go hand in hand. So I would be a large proponent of updating that one as well. And I actually think some of those design recommendations are in areas that have subsequently been redeveloped. So I think it's important, especially as we have larger scale developments coming in, to be able to give more guidance to what do we want these things to look like? How do we want them broken up so that there is a more pedestrian scale felt instead of a cavernous city streets? So, yes, thank you.
Okay, I had a couple of questions. I mean, I agree with the observation that, I mean, these are all good topics that need to be updated. What is kind of the process here? Is this something where staff would make some proposed changes and then come and ask in a work session for us to respond?
So there's, do you mean the process for updating a chapter or the process for sort of kicking off an update?
Both.
Okay. So process for updating a chapter, like I said, it's typically 9 to 12 months. And it depends on the topic and sort of how the vacations fall.
But is that your 9 to 12 months, or what is that the overall process to get to adoption of the change?
Yeah, so from the time, I would say from the time staff starts working on it till the time we get it to final council action. So I'm going a little off memory here, but typically what happens is we start with staff review of best practices. So we look at what does the state code require us to do. We look at example communities and what are common elements that they include in their chapters. We look for sort of model communities or sort of similarly situated. And we review the existing chapter and the status against achieving the goals or the actions within it. So we bring all that to the commission and we say, okay, here's the state of requirements, here's the state of the chapter, here's how much the community achieved, here's some best practices, and then we make some recommendations out of that. We say, gosh, here are the things that got done and are important to highlight, or the things that didn't get done and really need to. Here are other elements you should include in the chapter based on either state code or best practices. And that's the first real kickoff. It's a little bit of a sort of a messy work session because it's getting a lot of people sort of onto the same sort of launch pad for a plan update. So that's the first work session, happens with the Planning Commission. And then typically there's one or two key boards and commission stakeholder groups that would obviously be interested as well. And so we go through the same exercise with those groups. And then after a chance to introduce everybody, we might do sort of a joint work session. Staff starts to work on sort of drafting the plan. We'd probably have in parallel some level of community engagement where we're sharing the same information and asking the same questions. Community meetings, web surveys, pop-up meetings, messages at the farmers market.
Public forums?
Public forums, and what would come out of that is some sort of draft. So there's probably, 2 to 3 months of sort of walking through the wilderness, and then that sort of coalesces into sort of the organization of a draft plan, sharing draft text. There's probably 3 months of refinement, and then there's, a couple months of sort of final actions.
Yeah, I think given how successful, or at least I thought was successful, the public forum that we had on T-zones.
Yeah.
That planning on something like that is maybe the best way we have for gathering public input.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
The only other point I would make is that since we're the city is embarking on looking at a community energy plan, and I guess we're slated to hear the government operations part of that here soon. Arlington did one of these about 10 years ago. They incorporated it in their comprehensive plan, so that may be something for us to think about as well.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's all I had.
Yep. Yeah. Sometimes what we've been able to do is sort of do it as part. So a master plan is a different level of legal review and legal advertising. So sometimes what we do is when we go in and update a comprehensive plan chapter, we go in and sort of sweep up all the plans that we've adopted since then and incorporate those references then when we're acting on the chapter, so that we don't sort of trigger sort of letters and legal notices and a bunch of other things.
Okay, any other points? Hopefully we provided you some useful input.
Yeah, no, this is what I needed, so thank you.
All right. No, I think you
Second item is just to update you on the status of the T-zone. So there was a work session with council on earlier this week on Monday, and there's, as I sort of introduced the item for council on Monday night, there's a combination of things that are the same and then some things that have changed. So things that have remained the same in the last proposals to council are things about overall building heights, setbacks, lot coverages, stormwater requirements, tree canopy requirements. All those things remain the same as we last presented, as staff last presented to council. What's changed is the way we talk about the schedule of committed affordable units. So through the VC process, the SE process, those are negotiated affordable housing contributions. It's usually a process that takes many months. We're talking about several acres of redevelopment, 6, 7 stories worth of building. And so there's a little more money involved, and there's more time involved and more thought. Not more thought put into it, but there's a longer thought process put into it. Whereas these T-zones, as they're structured, are less than an acre in size. The building heights are noticeably smaller. The setbacks are bigger. And so what was proposed when we went to council last time was to have a schedule, a sort of a committed percentage of affordable units at 10% of the units on site. When we looked at the state code, the enabling legislation, when you set a schedule like that and say, okay, it's got to be this percentage affordable, then there has to be some corresponding density bump that goes along with that. And of course, the way we'd been talking about T-zones to date had all been about heights and setbacks, so there had been no structure to attach a density bonus to. And so what we brought to council was a way to achieve that linkage between committed affordable units and density bumps in the form of square footage. So we established sort of a by right square footage for development, and then a density bump that could be achieved if you met a prescribed schedule of committed affordable units. I think not unanimously, but overall, I think the approach for T-zones and some sort of alternative housing form was well met by council. Again, not unanimous, but I think by the majority of council. So they did provide, as a group, direction to staff to work on turning that framework into code that they could take a first reading on or consider for first reading. And also, as part of refining the program, to really focus on trying to incentivize or maximize the number of units, new construction units, that would be priced somewhere in that $800,000 to $900,000 range, something less than $1 million. So it's right. It's a combination of being true to the community conversation that's happened to date around the site design and the building design, and then making sure that's what's proposed is well embedded within the enabling legislation.
Can I just ask a quick question on that? I mean, if a percent, so like on these sites, like 4 units can be built, maybe? Like how many units are we talking, and then what percentage? And I mean, I'm assuming that you're allowing greater density, and then it's going to be an in-kind contribution, because you're not going to get a unit on any of the parcel. You're not even going to get a unit.
It's been so that's one of the things that's been a little tricky. I think our guess at the staff level is that the state legislation is talking about big developments, right, where you're talking about hundreds of units at a time, and we're talking about, tens or fewer units at a time. So the rounding error has become a big deal. So one of the things we're trying to make sure we can carry forward is the Housing Commission recommendation to allow for cash in lieu. In terms, the other thing we're looking for in terms of flexibility is maybe you allow the unit sizes to vary while still setting a floor on any particular unit size, so that you're not getting a, you don't want a 300-foot unit. That's not great. And so thinking about maybe an average unit size or a minimum unit size. And then the other thing we're trying to work through, staying within state code, maybe that density bump, maybe it's in units per acre or maybe it's in square footage, trying to figure out how do you actually make the numbers work. Right, we want to have this community goal of delivering this alternative housing form, delivering on more affordable units. But obviously, you got to write a regime that someone can actually afford to build, and that's been a challenge.
Well, I think we certainly look forward to diving into this again. I'll just share with the commissioners, I did have a quick chat with the new city attorney, Sally Gillette, and I shared with her the keen interest that we had for her to attend our meeting when we look at this issue again, and she's very willing to do that. So we didn't schedule anything for right at this time until things clear up a little bit as to when the dates will occur.
Can I just one other question? That's great that she's willing to come. But just, I mean, maybe I'm stating the obvious, but the fact that these T-zones and where we have been and where we have went and where we are going on affordable, just please, when you vote on this, do not vote by thinking there's any affordability in this. This is getting to be ridiculous. So if you like the idea of a T-zone and you want development, vote for it. But just if you have any inclination that this will provide any affordable housing for our city, please don't vote for it. So it's clear.
Okay, any other points of advocacy or?
Can you just be clear about the timing for that? Or when, so we're not going to, the schedule that's on here is not?
No, we're looking at that. We had, it's sort of a funny artifact of having a smaller staff. Everyone scheduled their vacations on the flip side of when we thought second reading was going to happen. So most folks are going to be out early July, and so we're just trying to figure out. We've got some research to do, some market testing to do, and we want to make sure the thing is fleshed out before we schedule it for first reading. So we owe you a revised schedule.
Okay. Anything else before we close out on our meeting this evening? Seeing nothing, I'll go ahead and declare this meeting over. Thank you all.
We signed. I think we signed on the way in. Huh?